Welcome in, everybody, to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. My name is Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, alongside Bill Bender, the lead college football writer at sportingnews.com. Thank you to everyone for listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you to our subscribers on the YouTube channel at CFB Nation. We're cranking out one show a week all through the off season. Shout out, of course, to Irish Breakdown, the sponsor of our podcast and your source for the best Notre Dame football information on the internet, on the Twitter sphere, the podcast sphere, any sort of sphere. Irish Breakdown is the place to go. Bill, we are deep into the off season here. And before we get into our bowl predictions extravaganza, all right, I want to check in on what's going on outside of Columbus, Ohio. I know it's the middle of the summer, so all of your kids' activities in terms of sports and everything, you just take a big vacation in the summer, right? There's no activities?
No, we were out. Hey, I got this shirt on. I'm going to plug these guys. The 256ers won their first lacrosse travel championship over the weekend. It was awesome.
Oh, boy.
I got to shout out Lincoln Sparling. He does read our content, by the way. He had the game-winning goal in overtime. It was awesome, man, watching the sixth grade boys do that. And then Bella's softball team wrapped up their season. I've got to get the video, but we hit into a triple play. They triple played us in a third and fourth grade softball level, which was equal parts base coaching and incredible play by the girl that made the catch. And I think it was an unassisted triple play. So
were you one of the base coaches? That's the big question.
No, I'm the pitcher. So I threw my the two base coaches are fine. These are girls. It was fun though. So she wrapped up softball, and then my son has another lacrosse tournament. And in between, those dads, when we're not talking about our kids playing lacrosse, I think they're super excited about the upcoming college football season. So, and they'll be more excited when they see Ohio State in the playoff, as we'll get into in these bowl projections.
No spoilers, Bill. No spoilers.
That's a bad one.
So, before we get forward, you can follow Bill Bender at Bill Bender 92 on Twitter. You can follow me at Bill Trocchi on Twitter. That's Trocchi. Bill, Alabama won the national championship in 92. Is that the 92 that is attached to your Twitter handle?
No, it's Reggie White's number and my number. More importantly, that's my high school number. So,
more importantly, all right.
Yeah, I wore it because of Reggie. So I was a receiver that wore 92, and so I always tell people assume that I graduated high school in 92. That would make me 6 years older than I am. I don't look 50. I mean, come on, man. Like, let's go. I got a couple more years before I get to that level.
Your resting face might make you look 50. Just remember that. We got a couple of resting face comments on our YouTube channel from last week's episode.
Oh dear, I'll work on that.
So we continue the countdown 9 weeks from week 0. But we're going to shift our attention forward to about 15 weeks after week 0. And focus on college football selection show, Selection Sunday. We're going to break down your bowl projections, which are live at sportingnews.com as we speak. How difficult or easy is this exercise every year? You do it in the summertime. You look at the number varies, roughly 40 bowl matchups. You do it in the summertime. How difficult is it?
Well, not everybody does it. 24/7 has these, and Brett McMurphy's kind of the king of these. And, I've been doing them since the first year of the playoff. I've been doing them for Sporting News. I went back and looked because I like accountability, and I found out of the 36 possible playoff teams, I've gotten 19 right. And then of the 18 championship game participants, I've got 10 of the 18 right. So you might say, well, it can't be that hard to pick Alabama and Clemson every year. Or, I mentioned Ohio State, which we'll get into in a minute, but you can pick those teams every year, but you might not get the championship game right. I'll go ahead and spoil Ohio State a little bit because I've picked them to go to the playoff 9 times in 10 years. And the year I didn't pick them, they won the national championship.
There you go.
So, I mean, it's obviously not a perfect science, but, and again, I've picked these for now 10 years, and I've only picked 12 teams to go to the playoff. which is, like you were talking about before we came on, it's the way the sport is. And the other funny thing is I've picked Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oklahoma the most. And I'm pretty sure, I'm going to have to go double check this. I'm pretty sure that combination of 4 has never gone to the playoff in the same season, even though they have the most playoff appearances among them.
So you went and looked at your playoff picks for the last 10 years. Okay. I, unbeknownst to you, looked at your summer bowl projections from last year and then checked them and see how you fared. And so you had one matchup 100% correct, and that was a big one. Georgia, Ohio State in the CFP semifinals. Wasn't the right bowl game. You had them out in the Fiesta Bowl instead of the Peach Bowl, but you still had Georgia and Ohio State. You had 7 of the 12 teams correct in the New Year's 6. So batting over 50% there. And you had 9 teams in the correct bowl.
Not bad.
On the slate. Yeah.
9, like out of
Miami
40.
Ohio in the Bahamas Bowl, correctly. You had
nice.
Cincinnati in the Fenway Bowl. You had Washington State in the Jimmy Kimmel Los Angeles Bowl, Florida at Las Vegas Bowl, Marshall at the Myrtle Beach Bowl, San Diego State going west to Hawaii, and then NC State, the Duke Mayo Bowl, and then 2 biggies in New Year's 6. You had USC in the Cotton Bowl, and you had Utah in the Rose Bowl. So not bad. 9, that was last year. 9 for however many
80 some. That's I mean, they're not easy.
It's not easy at all. No.
I tell people, so once you do them the first time, it really becomes, I don't treat it like I've got to get these right. I treat it more like, it's kind of like if you were reading how stocks are doing during the season. When we do these during the season, it's kind of like, well, if I'm projecting forward, this is what I think the matchup's going to be, but it's also reflective of record. So like, that's cool. We got USC and Utah right last year. I mean, but I would probably say during the season, I probably had it reversed. I probably had USC winning and Utah finishing second to them once we got into each week we do them. I'm always amazed at people, how they overreact to these and how, they get fired up. People get about being projected not to go to the Duke's Mayo Bowl, for example. So, or the Pop-Tarts Bowl this year. But I've enjoyed doing this. I got my spreadsheet. I've been doing it for, I think, like I said, 10 years now. So there's a lot of trial and error. But at the end of the day, those 10 to 12 schools typically get there in the end.
All right. So Trocchi trivia before we kick it off. Trocchi trivia. You love bowls, Bill. This is a bowl-themed question. You've been nailing them all off season. So I still think you're going to do well. You love all the bowls. You don't want to cut any bowls. If there were 150 bowls, you'd be all over the 150 bowls. So we're going to flash back to last bowl season. Can you name the highest scoring bowl? 2 teams combined score. What was the highest scoring bowl? And then there was actually a tie for the second highest scoring bowl. So see if you can name those 2 games. So I'm looking for 3 games. The highest one, and then there was a tie for second for the second highest combined score of both teams. So you think about that as we go through the show. We'll give the answer at the end of the show. So let's get right into it. Like we said, on sportingnews.com, your bowl projections are live. We'll start right at the top, the CFP semifinals of the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. You've got Michigan, USC, an old Rose Bowl favorite. You've got Georgia, Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl, a little bit of a rematch from last year's Peach Bowl. How did you get to these matchups?
Well, I think Michigan and Ohio State are both going to be 11-0 again when they play. I know there's a ton of hype around Penn State. That's the first school I got pushback about. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But if Michigan and Ohio State go 11-0 again, and if it's a close game again, I think the same scenario is going to unfold. I think Michigan wins a close one in Ann Arbor, at least for now. And again, that's one that the opinion could flip as we get into the season. And then I think Ohio State will get into the playoff. And that seems more likely to me than Alabama getting out of the West without a bruise or 2 with their schedule and their uncertain quarterback situation, with Georgia, who's an absolute monster. So those 3 are good. So when you get to that point, it's like, okay, now who am I picking? Am I going to pick Florida State or Clemson or USC? And we had talked last week on our exercise. Remember, I'm putting my money where my mouth is, so to speak, because I said if I was betting on the next Pac-12 school to make the playoff, I said USC. So
And it's got to be this season.
So it's got to be now. And you come up with two really good matchups that people will watch. Full circle, too, because in this final year of the 14 playoff, I was actually fortunate enough to cover the first one when Florida State played Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And I'm glad that they're at the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl because, I mean, you can't beat that. You can't beat Michigan and USC in the Rose Bowl, and you can't beat a rematch of the two most talented teams as far as like day one NFL talent in the country probably this year, with Alabama being right there with them. But that was kind of my selection show process in my head, so to speak.
Okay, so you got basically Ohio State as the 4 seed, Georgia as the 1 seed, and then you like Georgia going undefeated to be number 1, and then Michigan at 2, and USC presumably at 3, right?
Right, and I guess if USC lost, we would have this discussion of should we have an Ohio State-Michigan semifinal, the same one we had last year where I say all the time, if they can avoid that, they're going to, so they can tease the possibility of a Ohio State-Michigan championship game, which might be this year, might be the best chance to have it. So it really is. But when you're stacking up our top 4, I still think, okay, the obvious thing here, and he was in the news this week, is Saban and Alabama. I mean, they're my next choice. They're like the first alternate. So it absolutely enough talent. And also I've picked them to the playoff 8 years. So this is the first year in a long time where we haven't put Alabama in the college football playoff.
So yeah, let's move on to the New Year's 6 predictions. What's your favorite matchup as you went through these? So I will reveal. You've got Alabama Clemson, who played for what, 4 national championships? In the last
3 and then a semi.
3 in a semifinal. This would be Alabama Clemson 5 as far as the New Year's 6 goes in the Peach Bowl, which I would be there. So that would be a fun one. Orange Bowl, Penn State, Florida State. The rematch of Joe Paterno, Bobby Bowden when they were both about 95 years old. Cotton Bowl Classic would be LSU, Texas. Fun one. And Fiesta Bowl, UTSA, your group of 5 pick against Washington out of the Pac-12. What game, if those took place, which one would you be most looking forward to watching?
Probably LSU, Texas, or Penn State, Florida, because that's the clump of teams that is
Florida State. Penn State, Florida State.
Penn State, Florida State. What did I say?
Florida.
Well, yeah, no, if it was Florida, that would be a surprise. I think I have them in the Las Vegas Bowl or something. So Penn State, Florida State, LSU, Texas, because that's the clump of teams that I think is most likely to one of those 4 maybe push into the playoff to begin with. So Florida State was a team I strongly considered to put ahead of USC, but they play LSU first, and they've got to beat Clemson, and those are tough tests. Penn State, I mean, I know you're pretty high on them. I still got to see them beat Ohio State before I can take that next step. So LSU, obviously with Jaden Daniels, a really good team. If I was given the choice of one of those games, I'd probably go LSU, Texas, because if Texas is in this spot, it means they had a really good year. They've got a ton of points, a teaser to them coming to the SEC. The last time they played, it was a 45-38 game. So, when Texas plays an SEC team in a bowl game, yeah, that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, that's my choice too. That one jumped off the screen, no doubt. Like you said, a precursor to the SEC thing. If they might as well jump in the SEC right then and there. Right. In Dallas, be fun. Classic Cotton Bowl Classic, and a great stadium and everything like that. That one totally jumped out. That's one that would be really, really fun. I saw your UTSA pick. I was thinking about other group of 5s, like, I think Tulane's going to be pretty good. There was somebody else I was thinking about group of 5. Like, who else did you consider group of 5 wise?
Tulane, Coastal, because it's kind of the Grayson McCall last dance. That'd be a cool thing if they broke through. The MAC's only had one team break through as much MAC football as I watch and love. Other than the 1 year with Western Michigan, you've got to go undefeated to get out of the MAC. And, with the UTSA is interesting to me. You've got a 7th-year quarterback, which makes you kind of do a double take when you're doing the research, and a really good one at that. Frank Harris it'd be a really cool stage for him, the Roadrunners. Between Michael Penix and Frank Harris, those are two of the nation's leaders in total offense. I think that would be an up and down game that would be a lot of fun. And again, Washington, another team in our New Year's Day 6 that a lot of people, I bet if I compiled a list of all the sites doing these bowl projections, that there'll be in a few that have they'll have a few that will have them in the playoff.
You know what would be funny is if San Diego State
right
got in there right before they go on the the Pac-12, or we think they're going on the Pac-12. The basketball team makes a national championship game in basketball. Football team sneaks into the New Year's 6. Like that would be they would be like, hey, we're ready, no doubt about it, right? So all right, let's go down to some of your other, your non New Year's 6, non semifinals, 2 or 3 that you came up with. You looked at like the bowl tie-ins and everything like that and how they project. What would be kind of fun if you hit it on the nose?
Illinois Pitt in the Pinstripe Bowl, because you'd have Brett and Pat on the same field, and those are sideline interviews worth listening to between those two. Kind of a hard-nosed, that would be a fun old school kind of big, Midwest type matchup. I thought Texas Tech, who a lot of people, Brett McMurphy has them in the college football, or not in the playoff, but I think he has them in the New Year's Day 6 as the Big 12 representative. So he's very high on them. I have them playing North Carolina. So between Tyler Shaw and Drake May, 2 quarterbacks that are going to get a lot of NFL attention, I think that's one that the NFL scouts would be interested in. And of course, I put my alma mater, Ohio. Here's a Trocchi trivia for you. What do Ohio and Marshall play for? What is that game labeled?
Goodness, sorry. Can't do it.
It's the Battle for the Bell, and an old MAC rivalry when Marshall was there, and Appalachia and all that kind of stuff with Ohio and Marshall. I'd be into that. I'd probably be fired up for that one, honestly. So those were a couple that I do have a sense of humor when I do these. Whenever I can, I try to make a matchup that has like that little bit of hint of drama. I think people would be fired up about Wisconsin and Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl. That would be a really good game. Really big. If Wisconsin's there with Luke Fickell, a huge game, honestly. Show what they would have done in year 1.
2 fan bases that travel like crazy. Yeah, that would be quite the interesting matchup. I have an idea. When I looked at your list, immediately jumped off the page. We'd have to change the dates, maybe move it to Indianapolis. And I want to have a back-to-back bowl game afternoon between the Las Vegas Bowl and the Gator Bowl, so that Michigan State would play UCLA in your Las Vegas Bowl and Kentucky plays Duke in the Gator Bowl, and rename it Champions Classic 2.
Yeah.
Mike DeCourcy could be the guy who flips the coin, the honorary grand marshal of the Champions Classic 2, right, for the college basketball side. If they're playing back-to-back bowl games, and maybe Riley Leonard from Duke can pull a Christian Laettner and throw a Hail Mary on the last play of the game to beat Kentucky.
I remember, was it last year, Kentucky, I believe they had a huge basketball game the same day as their bowl game. Because I remember talking to Matthew Lawrence in Lexington radio about this. And it's like, which one are you really watching? Kentucky and Iowa? And I think Kentucky's basketball team was playing, Kansas or somebody like that. And those matchups always attract a lot of attention. Kentucky Duke would be interesting because it would mean Riley Leonard had a big season. They got to that point, and Kentucky with Devin Leary. That would be another one that, yes, I would watch. And yes, those fan bases would care more if it was a basketball game, but that doesn't kind of take away what they've both been able to do on the football field.
No doubt. Oklahoma, Florida would be a fun one too, before Oklahoma joins the SEC, and that becomes a semi-annual or possibly an annual event. That would be, you've got them in the Texas Bowl as 2 schools punching below their weight for now on the football field. But when they are co-SEC league, sweet mates there, that's going to be a fun rivalry. It could develop. That's one of the rivalries people are kind of looking forward to, kind of an underrated one that's going to take place.
Oh, yeah. And that's, again, part of doing these. And you mentioned Oklahoma as well. I didn't even think about that till you said it. Oh, yeah, they're going to go try to get a rivalry going with Florida as well. Again, having a sense of humor and just enjoying the process of doing them, trying to get all the tie-ins right. I know it's hard. It's just hard to you might miss one here that you got to go back and correct because you're like, oh yeah, the Big Ten won't play in this one for every third year or something. So, but they are pretty accurate. They're pretty fun. And like you said, there's some good trends in here.
So there's 11 new Power 5 coaches we're keeping an eye on.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got 8 of them going to bowl games. Some of them are notable in terms of, I think we expect Hugh Freeze of Auburn to get to a bowl game. Obviously, Luke Fickell is going to be bowl bound. Jeff Brom, Louisville, I would think, not much problem. Some of the notable ones to me, Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State has taken over a program sort of in disarray, and he cleaned house. Not quite as much as Dion, but he cleaned house. Brent Key, Georgia Tech, getting them back to 500. That would be interesting. And Matt Rule from Nebraska, getting him into the Duke's Mayo Bowl, Nebraska's first bowl since 2016. Is that possible? It is possible. Nebraska has not been to a bowl in 2016. You say the bowl drought ends this year.
That's crazy. And that would attract the most attention of all those coaches that you mentioned. And who do I have them playing?
NC State.
NC State, Nebraska, a lot of red in that stadium then. But that would be a win for Matt Rule to get to a bowl game, and a huge win, honestly. I think you're right about Hugh Freeze. They typically can scratch out 6 or 7 the way that Auburn does. It's super unpredictable. We talked a little bit about Jeff Brom in Louisville last week and how I'm pretty high on them. I'm really high on Dillingham, but that's a part of the tough choices you have to make. So by putting Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State in the bowl game, I left Arizona out. And Arizona was 5-7 and has a good quarterback and was right on the edge of being in the postseason. So that's one. I'm trying to think. The first Big Ten team I had out was either, I guess Northwestern kind of. But Ryan Walters in Purdue left in, barely made it in. So it's one of those things where you have to make some tough decisions when you make these bowl things. And, we'll see how some of these first-year coaches do.
No bowl for Dion.
Also a tough decision because I know that would get us 100 more clicks if I put Dion in there and a couple more retweets because they're, hey, look, Colorado's in the Vegas Bowl or the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl. But no, I maybe they will. Like I said, we've talked about this. 6 wins would
their schedule is so hard, so early. The front loaded.
6 wins would be huge for them.
Yeah,
absolutely huge for them.
I can't imagine them going from 1-11 to 6-6. I just can't picture it, especially like with some of their non-conference games, Nebraska and TCU. They can't just start off 4-0,
right?
You know what I mean, and then get 2 more in the Big 12 or in the Pac-12. So I don't see that happening for Dion this year. So, all right, well, Trocchi trivia answer. All right, last bowl season, what was the highest scoring bowl? And then what were the 2 bowls that tied for second as the highest scoring bowls?
I'm blanking on one. I think the highest scoring bowl was Kansas and Arkansas.
You are correct.
That was a fun game that I watched pretty much cover to cover because of how absurd it was, especially at the end.
Triple overtime. Do you remember what bowl it was?
Liberty Bowl.
Liberty Bowl in Memphis. Correct. Arkansas 55, Kansas 53, triple overtime. And
wild comeback.
The 2 schools met in the NCAA tournament later in the spring, and they did exceed the football score as far as points. But I wasn't sure they were going to after 108 points in the football game.
There was a grown man in a hog costume at that game. I do remember that. So, 2, one of them is Michigan TCU, right? It's got to be 96 points, or was there a game with more?
Let me double check. My answer. I think actually you might be right. Skipped over that semifinal. You know why?
Because you I don't know. You picked TCU to win the game. That
sounds
like your
TCU.
problem. You're the one that picked TCU. You were the guy that picked TCU to win.
I know.
So what was third? Now I'm genuinely curious if that's the actual right
the other
answer.
semifinal. How about that?
So that was tied with another game?
Yes. So the other semifinal was Georgia 42, Ohio State 41, 83 points. Peach Bowl. And then there was one other 83-point game. It's not too obscure. I'm sure you watched it. Took care,
That's one I'm blanking on. I'm like really thinking Notre Dame, South Carolina.
Very, very good.
It took a minute, but I knew that. What was the final score of that
Gator
one?
Bowl, Notre Dame 45, South Carolina 38. There was 83 points in that one as well.
So bowl games are fun. Those were all. You know how I feel about high scoring bowl games because you got to have some defense in there. But all 4 of those games were fun on different levels. I would say you got to have a handful of those. But certainly, yeah, Michigan. I couldn't forget Michigan TCU in that one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So fumble on my part, off-season gaff. But that's it. So, yeah, I encourage everybody to go to sportingnews.com. Check out Bill's bowl matchups. They're fun. Some of them are going to be right. A lot of the playoff teams, he's been over 50% for 10 years in a row. So if your team is in there, you got a better than 50% chance of making the playoff. Check out the other matchups. It's going to be fun. Another week is in the books. Next time we reconvene, it will be 8 weeks till week 0. And we will be able to start breaking down some of the matchups in week 1. That's only a few weeks away, probably. So thanks once again, everyone, for listening to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next week.